Welcome viewers, I am Dr. Tarang Kapoor and today's lecture is on Introduction to Applied Ethics. In the previous lectures on this series, we have studied ethics, values, morality, virtues along with the three major approaches to understanding ethics, namely normative, applied and meta-ethics. For lecture today, we are going to delve into applied ethics. Applied ethics is a branch of philosophy whose subject matter is the application of moral rules, principles or concepts to real life situations. These issues can be as diverse as euthanasia, abortion, surrogacy and several other interrelated situations. The term applied ethics or practical ethics has recent origins as it gained prominence during 1970s when philosophers, theorists and academicians started using ethical theories and moral philosophy to address the pertinent problems faced by the society. For the purpose of definition, problem of moral content and methods of justification, I have here referred to Tom Besham's article, The Nature of Applied Ethics. It was in 1960s and 70s that the discipline of philosophy came into contact with professionals in various other fields, like the fields of medicine, law, business, engineering, sciences, also with designers and others. This interaction led to the generation of interest in professional ethics and related issues, leading to the development of fields such as medical ethics, environmental ethics, among others. Applied ethics derives its intellectual stimulus from moral philosophy and aims to provide solutions to emerging moral problems in the society. For instance, there has been a history of civil rights, human rights, social rights movements. Many individuals in the field of law, theology, political theory, professionals who are working in media and business have addressed issues in applied ethics from time to time. There is a wide array of topics that form the subject matter of this field, and these topics can be traced to ancient times. In every society, individuals are affected with a wide range of concerns related to individual liberty, equality, injustice, abuse of the marginalized communities, also interrelated matters which are related to justice, equality and parity, among others. Philosophers have not only developed moral theories about right, good, virtue and other interrelated concepts, but they have simultaneously discussed moral problems. However, it should be noted that no major philosopher throughout the history of moral philosophy has developed one particular method, a method of applied ethics. The concern of applied ethics is practical in nature, rather than being merely theoretical, wherein we, in the sphere of normative ethics, as we saw, that there was an attempt to give theoretical understanding about laws and principles which should govern our moral conduct. In applied ethics, the sphere is the sphere of practice. There has been a persistent gap in the theoretical and practical spheres as one fails to understand the application of the theory. How do you apply the given theory in order to generate public policy and resolve our moral problems? Applied ethics deals with the real-world actions and their moral considerations in the areas of public and private lives. It discusses issues such as abortion, protection of human and animal subjects in research, affirmative actions, other kinds of moral issues pertaining to our work sphere, like the issues of privacy, freedom of information in the digital sphere, obligation to our future generations, and this is seen prominently in the discussions on environmental ethics, also issues related to intellectual property rights, discrimination based on race, sex, and our behavior with the animals, among others. Rajendra Prasad, in his paper Applying Ethics, Modes, Motives and Levels of Commitment, discusses about logistics of applying ethical principles, the motivation their application requires, as well as the levels of commitment which are involved in their applications. Now, there has been no consensus on a clear-cut definition of applied ethics, but let us attempt to preliminarily see how we will define it. So, we can define it as systematic application of general ethical theories to particular moral problems. So, from general, when we move towards a particular systematic application, and this is given by Gert in his 1982 article. We observe that whenever one is in a moral dilemma, application of ethical theories can pave the way for action. Moral dilemmas are situations where we are faced with certain critical questions like, what ought I do? What is the moral right thing to do in a particular situation? Moral dilemmas involve conflicts in decision making in real terms, in terms of the real events or any future possibilities, moral outcomes of drawing a certain legal document and other such situations. For example, in the issue of euthanasia or mercy killing, the pertinent dilemma which is faced by the policymakers, medical practitioners and legal experts is whether one has the right to die with dignity, whether the doctor has the moral obligation to respect patient's right to life. If the patient lacks the capacity to make a decision about their own life, then who should be allowed to take a decision on their behalf? Whether there can be a duty to die and whether there can be a duty towards preserving life, among other questions. Similarly, in business ethics, there can be possible conflicts between the rights and the obligations of the consumer and the producer of goods. The conflicts related to the rights of the employer and the employees also take various forms. For example, the conflicts related to the rights of the consumer is another sphere which we can debate in business ethics. In media ethics, there is a conflict between individual rights to privacy and the private right to get information about a public personality. So the consumer's right to information and provider's obligation to exercise restraint in the distribution of this information will be another example of a conflict in digital media ethics. Other areas where similar conflicts appear are environment, legal spheres, computer application-based spheres, and others related to personal or professional lives of our masses. Eventually, substantive, normative and meta-ethical considerations also tend to enter the domain of applied ethics. So, we see that none of these spheres can be exclusive of one another. So, a concern which is normative in nature is having a say on the meta-ethical aspect of that concern, and then it will also have say over the application orientation of that concern. So the supporters of this definition, which we are trying to articulate here, presented by Gert, believe that applied ethics implements either general moral norms or theories to be applied on a particular instance or event at hand. Argument and analysis then are considered the primary tools for examining any moral problem. So, however, when we see this problem here closely, we observe that we gather it is not possible to make practical judgments by appealing either to moral theories or merely moral theories or principles. Instead, moral theories and moral principles they ought to be supplemented in some way or the other by the practical cases at hand. For For example, when we look at cases like what is the right action in a particular situation, how does a particular organization experience their day to day, and the other empirical data which helps us to understand that particular kind of research. So traditionally, it is observed that general theories address speculative and conceptual philosophical problems which are disengaged from practice. And there is this charge against philosophy as a discipline, mostly when we talk about the gap between theory and practice, which we have been dealing with. The job of an ethical theorist then, therefore, has been to always explain and justify morality in order to clarify the nature of moral concepts, examining moral judgments and arguments, and to apply basic principles of morals. And then the application part, which I spoke, which is the latter part, will be able to be taken care of when the concepts and principles have been thrust upon properly. So traditionally, their job is not to use normative theories in order to solve practical or moral problems, and that's why there has been this whole gap between what we analyze and articulate in terms of theory stands alone or stands apart from what we actually face as a dilemma in a practical sphere. So as I already discussed above, that there is always an implicit or explicit theory-practice gap, because it is always questionable how theory can be supplemented with practice, with our day-to-day experiences, how they can be part of the theory articulation. Therefore, it is argued that applied ethics, as the application of general ethical theories to particular moral problems, is a narrow way of defining it. And which neither defines the appropriate method, nor this kind of an application defines the content of applied ethics. So let us look at this quote from Brosham. A weaker and more defensible view is that applied ethics refers to any use of philosophical methods to treat moral problems, practices and policies in the government, professions, technologies and the like. So we are going to go if we take this to a detour and go towards this more weak and defensible kind of definition, rather than just saying that theory is applied to practice, a kind of top to bottom approach. And so for this I am going to discuss what all are the limitations of this definition first, the one by Basham. The limitation of this definition is that this use of philosophical methods neither commits one towards the role played by the general theories nor towards problem solving as a goal. So few academicians, equate applied ethics with professional ethics. Then what is the difference between application and seeing it in terms of a professional resolution? So professional ethics comprises of rules followed by members of a profession to govern their own practice. Yet there are many problems which extend beyond the professional conduct, but turn out to be potent issues. Those problems turn out to be a potent subject matter or potent issues which should be considered part of applied ethics, like abortion, allocation of scarce medical resources, pornography, hate crimes, intergenerational justices, demands, domestic abuse, child sex labor and child sex abuses, among others, and this seriously limits the scope of the proposed definition. So if we turn it narrowly define it and turn it to be a definition of professional conduct, or how do we conduct ourselves ethically in a professional sphere, still we have to deal with so many ethical concerns which are standing, so to speak, at the boundary of a particular profession, but need to be taken care of and taken account of. These conceptual questions with regard to the nature of applied ethics show us that applied ethics is a difficult notion to define, and therefore we should delve into a detailed understanding of both the two things I just mentioned, both the content and the methods of application, to get a fuller view of this inquiry. Now let us discuss the approaches to understand moral content. So broadly speaking, there can be three approaches: an internal account, an external account, a mixed internal and external account. Let us delve into the first approach. The question which often comes to our mind is, are there any internal standards for professional morality or institutional morality? So the internal account is asking the question on internal standards which are held accountable when it comes to dealing with the professional or institutional morality. Now, what is internalism? Internalism has argued that ethics ought to be derived from professional, institutional, and group ethos. Or whatever the profession we are talking about, that professional should should have or has already some professional or institutional ethos based on which that profession is grounded. So internalism talks about evoking these ethos to understand the ethical conduct vis-a-vis that profession. Alexander McIntyre holds that a practice, goods internal to a practice, are achieved by engaging in the practice with a cooperative arrangement and conforming to the standards of that practice itself. So each and every profession traditionally has a set of standards which are internal, integrally internal to its existence. They determine what it means to be a good practitioner in that particular domain. However, traditional as well as professional standards do not guarantee that internal morality would be coherent and acceptable. So this is just one view of understanding what constitutes the standards when it comes to morality of a particular profession. So even if those standards are coherent and acceptable, that doesn't ensure that those will be the standards which should govern that particular profession's morality. On several occasions, it is observed that internal standards are indefensibly rigid and authoritarian, and therefore it is imperative that an internal morality should evolve with social changes. Beauchamp has agreed to Brodie and Miller's suggestion that there is an utmost need of reevaluation and reconstruction from time to time. So there is a pertinent criticism of authoritarianism, and maybe a kind of rigidity can set in when it comes to only giving precedence to the internal standards by which a particular profession is governed. For example, the question which we might face is that are there external standards for professional and institutional morality? So there is a kind of a binary here that are these standards internal or external? So the second question to which we are coming, and with this we are coming to the second approach to understanding what professional morality and constitutes in. So let us understand what is externalism. External morality incorporates norms that sustain and supplement norms of an internal morality. So this concept maintains that precepts in settings of applied ethics rely upon and require justification by external standards, such as those of public opinion. So these standards can be public opinion, law, common morality, religious ethics, which is already acceptable in that particular society or to the people of that particular profession, and philosophical ethics in that culture or community. So externalism, as is clear, is seen in opposition to internalism, in as far as it also the positive take here is that it also helps us to supplement the norms of an internal morality by considering norms which are external vis-a-vis the internal ones. So ethical theories provide the adequate basis for applied ethics. Over the years, law, religion, philosophical theories have served as sources of external morality. The benefit of a single ethical theory is that it provides a background and a fresh framework which can help mitigate the dispute among conflicting parties. However, there are several questions that can be raised on an externalist account. For example, which moral theory is morally authoritative over the others? How a particular philosophical theory is used to criticize internal standards or address a difficult moral problem? Can informed individuals reject an authoritative theory? After developing a consensus that a particular ethical theory is appropriate for this task, we should work constructively in the domain of practical and policy questions by progressively making the norms in the theory more specific. So, our task doesn't end here, that we define what is internal and what is external standard. Instead, our task is multifaceted. It's an ongoing task. It's a progressive endeavor where we are working constructively in the domain of this practice and policy questions. At present, no such theory or a general consensus has been in sight. So no consensus has emerged, and this brings me to the third articulation about mixed internalism and and externalism. So this approach incorporates the elements of both internalism and externalism, as is clear from the phrase. Different cultures and groups have different sets of moral commitments. On the one hand, internal morality fixes moral standards by membership within a profession or group. On the other hand, external morality fixes moral standards owing to the external broader cultural community. If necessary, professions and institutions are expected to reform their practices so that the prevailing moral rules of the larger society will be honored in practice. These social standards will vary from society to society. Although this account shows us that the relation between external and internal moralities, this account also has many weaknesses. When we emphasize diversity, we definitely overlook the basic similarities. And it's not that we definitely overlook, but there is a fear that we will overlook the similarities, and many times we end up neglecting the common moral goals that exist among people. For instance, many professions share the same moral perspective and share norms of professional practice. Also, the theory overstates the degree of shared agreement, which makes the community cohesive as they are composed of subgroups with different moral points of view. So the mixed internalism and externalism account precludes all kinds of cross-cultural, cross-community judgments. This account is unable to explain, justify and criticize public policy, and hence unable to apply ethics to our day-to-day problems. Now, the problem of method and justification in the domain of applied ethics can be explained by three models. And now I will be elaborating only the first model in this lecture, which is the top-down model. The top-down models apply the pre-existing norms to new particular events, situations available in front of us. Its method involves applying a general rule or principle to a case that falls under the rule. These models follow a deductive form in applying the rule. They take the following deductive form. Every act of description A is obligatory. Act B is of description A. Therefore, Act B is obligatory. This approach considers that a single principle or rule can be used to decide the rightness, wrongness of actions. There are several problems with moral priority being given to pre-existing moral laws, as I was speaking in the introduction. Many times it is required that the application of moral norms has to be preceded by making the norms themselves more specific. This should be done before a particular instance is brought under all-encompassing principle. We should check previous precedents in order to give weight to rules, theories, and principles. The important theory of normative ethics have already been discussed in the previous lectures, like utilitarianism, which believes an action is right if it is maximizing the overall goodness. Similarly, Kantian ethics accepts an action to be right if it does not violate the imperatives of rationality or respects people. Virtue theory adheres with what would be done by an ideal virtuous person in a morally dilemmatic situation. Furthermore, these theories might not hold consistently for various reasons. No general norms might clearly be applicable to any particular situation anyway, because any situation is always unique in its own self. Therefore, moral norms applied to a particular event may give inconclusive results. For example, if we look at utilitarian justification, we would realize that many a times it might take certain things to be morally justified, despite of the fact that maximum number of people might be wrong about their happiness, what their happiness consists in. So in the top-down model, not only it is difficult to prove that some norms are self-justifying, but there is also a possibility of infinite regress in the process of reasoning. Another variation in the top-down model is pluralistic kind of ethical theories comprising of various moral principles on the lines of the three already mentioned. There are multiple principles, there are various others like feminist ethics, care ethics, on the basis of which rightness, wrongness of a given action among the array of applied ethic issues can be determined. So, and along with these other normative ethical theories, there are several others which can be taken up in the top-down model. With this, we have come to an end of this lecture. In the next lecture, I am going to discuss the other two approaches, the second and the third model, to address the problem, pertinent problem of method and justification in the area of applied ethics. Thank you.